Hey y'all, today we are going to talk all about mom butt. So we're going to talk about what it is, why it happens, and things that you can do about it or things that you can do to prevent it. Before we jump into it, I want to invite you to my free core and pelvic floor class. 3 things that you can do now to strengthen your core and pelvic floor. It's on October 18th. It's going to be a free online 1-hour class, and you can find the link to register for it in the description of this video. Now let's jump into all things that we need to know about mom butt. Okay, first we need to talk about what mom butt is. That is the social term that people use to describe the phenomenon of when a woman's butt becomes very, very flat, or they basically just lose their butt or lose their glute muscles during pregnancy or into postpartum. For some, it's something that happens during pregnancy and then it carries over still into postpartum. For some, it's something that really pops up during postpartum or once they're a mom. That's how it got the term mom butt. But we are going to talk about what it actually is so that we can also learn what to do about it. Okay, mom butt happens because, especially during pregnancy, as your center of gravity changes, as your belly grows, the tendency, because it feels the easiest, the tendency is to start to get that weight shift backwards, and it starts with shifting back into your heels, and then you start to get that backward lean posture. So think of the pregnancy posture that we are just all used to seeing a super pregnant woman standing in, where she's leaned back, her back is a little bit arched. The tendency for that to happen is because it feels harder to stay stacked the more and more your center of gravity changes during pregnancy. The problem with not fighting to stay stacked and instead just almost countering that new weight or countering the new center of gravity is that as soon as you get into that weight shift into your heels and that backward lean position, now something else has to help hold you up, and that something else that tends to start to hold you up are your glutes. And so now, instead of our glutes getting to be the big powerful movers that they are, where they're lengthening and shortening to help move us through space, help stand us up from a chair, help walk up and down a set of stairs, they are busy just staying in a clenched position simply to help hold us up against gravity. What starts to happen when we start to clench a muscle that, well, no muscle is meant to be clenched, but especially start to use a muscle that is meant to be a mover, and now we're essentially using it as a stabilizer, which isn't what it was meant to do. When we hold that muscle in a clenched pattern all day long, it starts to get very weak and we start to lose muscle mass, or you can think of that muscle starting to waste away. And then over time, that is the cause of what we call mom butt, where that butt starts to get super flat. It looks like you've lost your glutes. It's because instead of that muscle getting to shorten and lengthen as you live your life, maybe even as you're doing your exercises, it starts to get very weak because it's clenched instead of shortening and lengthening. So whenever we stop lengthening and shortening a muscle, we can always bring it back to your bicep, right? You can imagine and you can see, if we're doing bicep curls, that bicep is lengthening and then it's shortening. That is what strengthens a muscle group. So if we're starting to stand with a clenched glute or clenched glutes all day long, then that muscle is eventually going to lose muscle tone and it's going to seem like it just kind of wastes away. So that's the image that we can have of what's the cause of mom butt or what's the start of mom butt during pregnancy. The problem is that then it doesn't usually stay just during pregnancy and then clear up on its own, because then when we move into postpartum, we have a newborn that we're carrying for years, right? Like, we start in that newborn phase, now we're carrying a toddler, but we never really learned how to carry a load appropriately without leaning back and just giving into or trying to counter the load. We never learned how to stay stacked while carrying your baby carrying your eventual toddler. And so that pattern will carry over in how you carry your baby after pregnancy. Sometimes it also just stays as a habit, not just with carrying your baby, but now even when you don't have something that you're carrying, you're just standing for a long period of time, or it affects how you move through space, how you get up from a chair, how you walk up and down stairs. And just how you stand and what posture you're standing in. We just keep it as a habit because we built it as a habit during pregnancy. And then if nothing came in and retrained the habit, then we keep those same stabilization patterns and movement patterns long after pregnancy, even if there's no cause to. So what the heck can we do about it, and how can we keep that from happening to you? The most important thing that you can start to do if you are currently pregnant, or if you're just now starting to notice mom butt, or that just feeling of those glutes being clenched all the time, first and foremost, I want you to check in with your posture. So whether you're pregnant or not, I want you to check in with yourself and see, where do you tend to carry your weight, or where do you tend to shift your weight in your feet? So when you're standing, check in with your foot. Is your weight mostly hanging out in the heels of your feet? Are you shifted forward onto the balls of your feet? That's a little bit more rare. Or do you have that really good even distribution of your weight on your whole base of support, which is your foot? So we want that center of gravity to feel like it's going straight through the middle of your arches. Or if it's easier to conceptualize or feel, then it's that feeling of your weight being evenly distributed between the balls of your feet and the heels of your feet. If you notice that you're someone that tends to hang out in your heels, then the best thing you can start doing is just catching yourself and correcting it. The more that you correct it, at first it's going to feel weird. At first it's going to feel like you're leaning really far forward, but I promise you're not. I promise it's not going to look as drastic as it feels. But the more that you catch yourself in your heels and shift your weight forward and then just move on with your day, the more you correct it, the more your brain will get used to it. So the more of a pattern it will become. So just starting to check in with yourself, but especially if you're currently pregnant, as that pregnancy progresses, see if you can catch it before it starts to happen. So start to get into the habit of checking where your weight is in your feet and try to keep yourself loaded up and over your whole foot and keep that center of gravity over your entire base of support of your foot. The next thing you can do after you've corrected where your weight is or where your weight shift is to just relax your muscles. So you might notice if you find yourself sitting in your heels that you're like, oh yeah, my quads are really gripped, those front thigh muscles, my glute muscles or your butt muscles are kind of gripped. You'll probably notice your pelvic floor is gripped as well. Once you shift your weight over the base of support that it's supposed to be over your whole foot, then let your muscles go. Sometimes it can be really hard to let them go, and I've had patients where they almost have to clench their muscles and then release them. That's okay too. That might be your first step, and that's a great place to start, but just start to get into the habit of letting those muscles go. And just like the weight shift, the more that you find it, identify it, and catch it, and then correct it, the more that your brain is going to pick up on that pattern, and you won't find yourself in that pattern so often. But step one is catching it and correcting it, and then just doing that throughout the day as much as you can. The last but not least thing that you can do is keep up with your inner core strength and your glute strength throughout pregnancy, or start to work on it if you feel like you're past that pregnancy stage. You know that you developed this pattern during pregnancy, and now what can you do about it? We can start to correct it. So the stronger and the more automatic that inner core unit is at supporting you, the easier it's going to feel and the more natural it's going to feel to just stay stacked over your feet, because those core muscles are going to really help support you, especially during pregnancy. If you're just starting out in pregnancy, or if you're just starting to start that part of pregnancy where you're like, okay, my posture is starting to change. I'm starting to feel like my body, I don't know how to use my body as well because it's so different. Staying tapped into that inner core unit is going to help you naturally stay stacked, because it's what's going to support you over your base of support. So then it won't feel like you have to try so hard to stay over your normal base of support and to stay stacked. It's going to feel like those muscles are naturally wanting you to be there, and it just won't take so much work to stay there or to get there. So staying tapped in and familiar with and associated with those inner core muscles can really, really help. And then also just glute strengthening and staying strong through your glutes with certain exercises are also going to just help prevent mom butt, because it's going to help those glute muscles remember that they are movers and they're supposed to be lengthening and shortening and helping move you through space. They aren't supposed to be posture muscles that are just gripped and holding you up all day. Okay, speaking of those exercises, I'm going to give you some examples of exercises that match what I was just talking about. We're going to link some of those exercises in the description of this video because I have some exercise instructional videos on my YouTube. So we're going to link some of those here just so you can see some examples. First and foremost, those inner core exercises aren't your traditional core exercises like crunches and twists and things like that. They're more of that deep core work that we don't always remember to do because it's not that like really good core burn that we want when we're doing a core exercise. We're going to link some of those in the description, like I said, but remember when we talk core exercises, especially during pregnancy, rehabbing postpartum, however far into postpartum that you are, we're really talking about those deep core muscles, the muscles that co-contract and work with the pelvic floor, not so much that big six-pack muscle or those big external obliques that you can really see and really feel. When we talk about the muscles that are going to help keep you stacked, help keep you supported during pregnancy, help you rehab your abdominal wall in postpartum, we're talking about those deep core muscles. So those are the exercises that you're going to see listed below. And then we also need to carry over the use of the stability from those deep core muscles into some hip hinge exercises. So one of the ones that I love giving for anyone when they're starting out in PT and we're really trying to teach their glutes again how to lengthen and shorten. Maybe they've spent a good amount of time clenching through those glutes and we need to retrain that pattern, or quadruped hip rock backs. You'll see that linked below, where we're just retraining your brain, retraining your body to remember what it's like to use your core as the stabilizers and then let the glutes be movers, where you feel them really lengthening and shortening and getting out of that clenched pattern. So that'll be linked below. And then we move into some of the glute strengthening exercises. Once we have that pattern down, it can be as simple as bridges, body weight hip thrusts, body weight or banded RDLs, or they can pick up into really loading the muscles with things like squats, deadlifts, heavier RDLs. If those are some of the exercises that you're already used to, then those patterns can carry over. But if we're doing those exercises without making sure that we have a set of glute muscles that are going to lengthen as we hinge and shorten to pick us back up, then we're really just perpetuating that clenched pattern. And we're using other muscles to hinge or to control that hinge pattern. So it really starts with retraining or making sure that we have the movement pattern down with the lengthening and shortening, and then we can load the muscles and we can start to build that muscle tone back up. If you find that you're like, oh man, I've been in a mom butt pattern for a really long time, I've got a lot of work to do, still got to start with the basics. We can't start loading those muscles right away. So building those patterns first and then loading the muscles, that's how we catch that muscle group back up and build that muscle tone back in so that we no longer have that flat mom butt, but we build those glutes back up. And that's my 2 cents on mom butt. So I used to, as a pelvic floor PT, I used to actually hate the term mom butt because I just felt like it doesn't tell people what it is or what's going on in the body so that they know how to correct it. It's almost like a write-off, like we're like, well, you're a mom, so of course you have mom butt when we give it that term. But I also recognize that it's just like a term for a recognized pattern that people have noticed, and we as pelvic floor PTs need to be better at educating about what it is and how you can actually prevent it, and how it's a sign of pelvic floor dysfunction. When we as PTs see somebody that has that glute pattern that looks like those muscles have really lost strength and really kind of wasted away and lost their muscle tone, it tells us that there's probably something pretty serious going on with pelvic floor as well, because that's a pattern that tends to go with pelvic floor dysfunction. So it's also something that is, even if aesthetically you're not that concerned about it, it is also something that is worth working on and addressing so that it doesn't start to carry over into pelvic floor dysfunction that nobody wants to deal with. So like I mentioned in the beginning, I want to invite you to my free core and pelvic floor class. 3 things that you can start doing now to strengthen your core and pelvic floor. Some of the things that we just talked about in this video, we're gonna go a little bit more in depth into a lot of the how and the what to do for these issues in that free class. The class is on Friday, October 18th. If you are unable to join it live, then by registering for the class, you're gonna get that free recording sent to you as soon as the class is over with. If you're watching this video past October 18th, I want you to know that that replay is still available. And if you're looking at the link in the description, then that link is to have access to the recording. But if you're watching this before October 18th, then the link to register for the live class is in the description of the video. If you are able to join live, I would really recommend it because at the very end, we're gonna be holding a live Q&A section where we're just going to make sure that we get all of your core and pelvic floor questions answered. So if you have been wondering about your own core and pelvic floor for a while now, then I would really recommend joining live because we can get those questions answered for you. But if you're unable to make it, like I said, you'll get the recording. The link to register is in the description of this video. My promise to you with this class is that you're going to leave this 1-hour online class with very tangible next steps that you can start doing on your own to improve the support that you feel from your core and your pelvic floor. So this is going to be a no fluff class. We aren't going to talk so much about the why and then you leave being like, okay, now what? You're going to leave knowing what to do, at least some first steps of what to do so that you can start addressing what you feel is going wrong or what you're unhappy with in your core and your pelvic floor muscles. So I hope you'll join me for that class. Like I said, the link to register is in the description below, and I'll see you guys next week.